Rick, how are you?
I'm doing great, Keith. How are you?
Good, man. I like this. What is this? Is this purple or plum? What color is that?
Yeah, this is plum. This is a frothy plum.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah, this is bringing out my inner painter today.
Oh, I like it. I like it. How's the blue look on me?
But I was just going to say the blue is fantastic with this. I didn't recognize you for a moment because you know what? I'm sure the audience was confused. No backward baseball cap.
No, not for this show. This is a serious topic. No, I'm kidding.
I thought they were all serious.
They're all serious.
Oh, man.
They're all serious.
Deflate my balloon.
Okay. So today's show topic is how to learn to self-problem solve.
Ooh, wow.
So let me tell you what inspired this topic.
Okay.
I have a young athlete who is a junior in high school who's preparing for college. So she's a tennis player. She does very well. She's nationally ranked. And she is working with a coach that her parents have kind of told me a little bit about, and so is she, that could use a little softening on communication. Could be a bit more gentle or gentler. I mean, still, demand or excellence, still do those things, still teach technique, but the coach is abusive.
Yeah.
I mean, very abusive verbally, and not open to the athlete having any sort of voice. So the player is finally, after years and years of working with this coach, the athlete has finally had enough, and it's time to move on to a new coach. And so the mom was relaying a exchange that the new coach and her young athlete had. And I thought it was really interesting. And so when they were doing their first practice, this tennis player hit the ball in the net a few times.
This is the new coach.
The new coach. The tennis player that he was working with, first time together, hit the ball into the net a few times. And in doing so, the coach stopped and said, "Do you know why you're hitting the ball into the net?" Now let me tell you about every coach I've had in the past.
Why? That's a very good question.
They would not have asked that question.
Oh, no.
They'd have told me, "Stop hitting the ball in the net. What are you doing wrong? Get it right. You're not working hard enough. Are you not listening to me?" They would go on that route, but that wasn't the case. Well, this coach said, "Do you know why you're hitting the ball into the net?" And what the coach was getting to is if you can observe or be aware of why you're hitting the net, you can self-problem solve and then begin to take corrective action.
By looking at the reason below it, maybe the coach doesn't have any clue about what that reason is, but you do.
Absolutely.
And so when you focus on that reason and can get out of it, then you improve.
Exactly.
Have you had an experience like that?
You know what, I just had one just a few weeks ago in which I went snowboarding in Utah. And I like to take 1 or 2 snowboarding lessons, although I've been doing it for years, with an instructor. And we went to some double black runs, a lot of moguls, some tree skiing and snowboarding. And we were on this run, and what I had a tendency to do was whenever I was making a toe side turn where I would be coming around and facing back up the mountain, I would drop my head. And when I would drop my head, I would bend at the waist, and my board would slide out under me. Fear was at work for sure. And what he started to do was he would hold his hand up above me and say, "When you make that turn, make sure you keep your eyes on me the whole time." So I couldn't drop my head and keep my eyes on him and trust the turn. So whenever he did hold his hand up there, he would ask me, "Do you know why your board keeps sliding out?" He'd already told me why, but if he would have just kept saying, "Your board is sliding out, your board is sliding out, stop doing that," it wouldn't have made me go back and look at what the reasons were contributing to it. Like, this helped me drill even deeper. And once he started asking me, "Do you know why?" I started to articulate it. I'm dropping my head. And because I'm dropping my head, I'm bending my waist. I'm losing leverage on the board is sliding out. It's happening every time. And then when I started to do more of those, I would immediately go back to keep your head up as if his hand is there. And as soon as I would do that, my hips would stay forward, I would stay on top of the board, and I would make the toe side turn without falling. It happened every single time. But just by him asking the question, it changed everything for me of why I thought I was doing it.
And it's a perfect example of learning how to self-counsel or learning how to self-improve, because you, again, are the person who's in control, but you have the 10,000-foot view.
Exactly.
And you can see what's going on, and you know inside what's going on with you.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'd like to change a little bit of that, angle and look at it from the standpoint of life lessons. When we're talking about trying to be better at problem solving, one of the things I think that's very helpful is if you could pretend like you are a professional counselor. Okay, let's make you a PhD in psychiatry.
Okay.
And in walks Keith Jones.
Right.
And he sits down and he lays out this problem and lay out whatever the problem is that you may be struggling with. How would the psychiatrist, Keith Jones, deal with the patient, Keith Jones? Suppose you were to rise up and watch these two interact. What would the counselor tell the patient? So I think using that technique can help us. If I am in a situation where I'm having a heck of a lot of difficulty, not only is the question, why are you doing this important, but what is it that you're actually doing that can be changed by you that the counselor can see that you can't? And because the counselor is you, you'll always be able to see what it is that you're screwing up with.
Oh, I like that a lot.
Yeah, so but you know, you have to be willing to fault yourself too. You have to be willing to come in and look at this and say, it's not the other guy's fault, it's my fault. What is it that I did in this situation that created it? Or forget fault, put fault aside and just think about what is it that caused this problem and how did I contribute to it or cause it myself? And you'll usually find out that it has something to do with a false image, usually something to do with a fantasy, a story that you tell about yourself that is the problem. I'll give an example. In law school, I had a very difficult time sitting in class and having the professor call on me because I felt, I didn't know this then, but I think down deep, and I later came to realize it was true, I felt inadequate. I didn't feel that I was as smart as the other kids in the class. I didn't feel that I had a strong enough academic record. I didn't feel that I had come from a prestigious enough school. So I always felt that no matter what I would say, it would be terrible, or it would be inadequate or ineffective or foolish. Well, once I got a clue on that, then I realized, hey, what I'm really doing is I'm acting out in accordance with a fantasy, a story that I've been telling myself that isn't true. So once I could see that, and the counselor in me was able to say, you know, do you want to suffer by this, or do you just want to let it go? Once I was able to give myself permission to let it go, I could see the solution and it worked out.
Wow, that's great. You know, the self-problem solving, you know, as I'm listening to you share about it, I'm, you know, kind of drilling deeper. And for me, the psychiatrist right now is becoming my conscious self, you know, that's observing my ego, you know. So, you know, here I am, you know, in this space of blaming or feeling guilty. And I know my conscious self, or as you mentioned, the psychiatrist would look at that and say, they would see all the suffering that's going on, that I'm going through. And we can see it in others, but it's very hard to see in ourselves, or the ego won't allow us to. And I'm seeing all this suffering going on. And for my conscious self, it's really easy. Like, stop suffering.
Yeah, that's right.
Like
if you're the psychiatrist and you do it professionally, it's easy to give the advice.
It's totally easy. And I'm saying that I can just stop being attached to this outcome. You know, this person may have said or did this thing, and as a psychiatrist or my conscious self, it's really clear to me that I have no control over what that person says or does. Like, it's really clear to me. But to ego, it's not clear at all.
No. You know, it raises this whole issue of letting go. You know, if you just realize that you can let go of all the stories you tell about yourself, and people will still like you, believe it or not, or you'll still be an effective person. You'll be more effective because you won't have all of this baggage that you're carrying with you, that you have to act in a certain way that's in conformity with what this foolish, often too perfect image of ourselves that we have.
You know, I really think the ego is a huge barrier.
It's a cancer.
I mean, it's just a huge barrier to being free and feeling liberated. Because I think of the example of,
tell it, brother.
Let's say somebody, if you feel disrespected, like, okay, so you get, like, you told me before that traffic is your thing, right? That's the one that's a practice, constant practice for you, right? So someone cuts you off, you almost run off the road, right? That action has already happened. And the psychiatrist or the counselor is sitting back there saying, let it go. It's all good. Or somebody confronts you or pushes you. And we celebrate the person who can walk away from those kind of confrontations, right? But when you're in it, it feels like There's no way I can let this go.
Well, that's because the ego is telling you that you are superior to the other person. You are different than the other person and better. You were wronged. You were a victim.
Right.
If you sit down and take this, you're nothing.
You will always be a victim.
You're all well, but the idea is that this ego thing is compounding itself so that you have to take action that's probably not in your best interest. And it certainly causes more suffering.
A lot more.
If you could just look at this, and I'm guilty of this, I work on it every day, but I still do it. When somebody cuts you off, you just kind of say, well, that's where they are in their path. You know, they've got to act out, and they've got to cut me off, or even if they were inadvertent about it and didn't do it. The idea is the circumstance created that. What's the choice that I have now to react to it?
Right, that's your path.
Yeah, and the psychiatrist, that's right, that's your practice.
Right.
And the psychiatrist in you, or your consciousness, is telling you, let it go, let it go. The more things you can let go, the fewer hot buttons you have, the more at ease you feel in the world, the more fun life is.
Absolutely.
And the more likable you are, I think.
You know, I got this this little thing that I used to do, but I think it's going to go to a more conscious level, was I stopped beating myself up a long time ago for not being perfect. And everything has to be black and white. You either win or you lose, you either hit the mark or you miss it altogether. There is no gray area. Mm-hmm. And I listened to this podcast by this guy named Lanny Bassham. He was doing an interview with this other podcast interviewer that I like to listen to, Brian Johnson. And he has two things that he asks all his athletes. And this really helped me with not feeling like a failure, beating myself up again for not being successful or winning a trophy. And what that is, he says, tell me what you did well, and tell me what needs work. And then, that just totally changes the whole conversation. And now if we add to it what this tennis coach has told one of my young clients and friends is, okay, why do you think you did that? Mm-hmm. You know, what contributed to that? Then it takes ego completely out of the mix. You know, ego is no longer a part of the conversation anymore, and you begin to look at it objectively from the psychiatrist's chair or from your higher self's perspective, your conscious self, and then everything becomes like something that can be easily resolved and can eliminate suffering.
And it can happen this quickly. It could be like that. You don't have to suffer any longer for it. You know, there's a concept in Japanese called wabi-sabi. It's W-A-B-A-S-A-B-I. And the idea is that things that are imperfect have a special beauty. And you need to have an appreciation of all things. Everything that's here is subjective. You give it the value that you want to give it. So somebody who looks at a weed and says, well, a weed is no different than a rose. It's just by you saying that it's different, or you having an appreciation for one over the other. It's just your call. It's no different, though, in the reality of things. In the black and white universe, a weed is a rose is a weed. So if you start with that perception, you become much more capable of seeing that you are God in your own universe, in the sense that you have the ability to have whatever attitude is appropriate for you. The attitude that always ought to be appropriate is to detach from being disappointed, to detach from believing that you have to be a certain way. And the wabi-sabi comes in with the idea that imperfection, impermanence are always going to be part of life. And the sooner that you find the beauty in imperfection and impermanence, the less you will suffer and the more complete and rich a life you will live.
Absolutely. You know, because when you think about it, if you live long enough or have enough challenges in your life, you become acquainted with the truth that life is not here to make you happy. Life is imperfect. We're all imperfect. And once you get that, it becomes so much easier to be open to becoming an observer of your life, to be able to self-problem solve. Mm-hmm. I think that people, including myself, that have had challenges accepting the imperfections, giving up expectations with respect to others and with life, detaching from material things or the way things should be, the people that are the most successful in doing that and being on this path are the people that really get that this is a lifelong journey, that it requires us to be the observer, and we can look at things objectively, and that is the path. Like, it's not the destination or where we're trying to get to, but this moment right here is the practice. This is where I'm going to self-problem solve. It actually takes a lot of pressure off, at least for me, to know that this is it. And I think the people that we celebrate the most are not the people that are overnight successes, but it's the people that have overcome tons of challenges, have gone through breakdowns to get to a breakthrough. Those are the people that really inspire me. I mean, those are my examples. I mean, what about you?
Well, same, and you inspire me in that same way. I've seen you go through some things and come out on the other side of it because of your mindfulness, and I think that's what you're talking about, really. The idea also that the process, as you say, is much more important than the ultimate outcome. And the people that you look up to and you admire, the people who are always involved in process, that have the same obstacles or even worse than you do, but have an attitude that allows them to always feel good about life, feel optimistic, feel as if they're not a victim.
Right.
And if you can accomplish that, that's probably a good part of getting to where you can be happy and fulfilled.
Right.
And I don't think it has anything to do with the material stuff. And you need a certain amount of money to have a decent life. But I think after you hit that, when you chase it, you're making a big mistake. Mindfulness, like you were saying, you're in a situation where there isn't any real threat right here, right now, in this moment. But there is a threat if we look at the future.
Right.
Or there is an anxiety if we remember something bad that happened to us. But if we can keep focused on the notion that we're self-repairing, we're self-correcting, and in this moment, there's nothing that's a problem. And so why not focus on not having a problem? There's no problem, okay? All right, now tomorrow there may be a problem. You deal with it tomorrow. Tomorrow will be a great time. But do you self-correct with the notion that in this moment, what do we need to work on? And if there's nothing, enjoy your life.
Right.
Smell the roses.
If there is something,
solve it.
Yeah, solve it.
Or get help to solve it. Or start working on it.
Yeah. Man, I just think it's just so interesting that like my heroes that are in my life every single day are people that are on this path, and they're able to problem solve. When I think about what's common with all of them is that they are able to take a step back, and sometimes not always in the moment, but often enough in the moment, and really objectively look and think about, instead of reacting, or even before they respond, they're able to take a step back and they're able to look at it objectively.
And objectively, we mean taking yourself out of the equation.
Yes.
So we're not looking at what's best for Rick or what's best for Keith.
Right.
You're looking at it more in terms of how did this play out and what caused me the pain of it. And usually the pain of it is caused by you trying to look good, or you trying to avoid looking bad, or you're trying to conform to this artificial fantasy about who you are and how perfect you have to be lovable.
Right.
I don't know how we get into these conversations.
Man, I just love the conversations, but I just think we go back to self-problem solving is possible, and the benefits of it are just so incredibly vast. I mean, I can't even talk. I can't overstate how much you get out of learning how to self-problem solve, as long as you have no agenda of what benefits the ego part of you.
In fact, you want to look at it as, how did my ego screw this up? If you start there, usually you're going to get
That's a great point.
How did my ego screw this up? What did I fail at?
Right.
And I'll tell you, you can even apply that to sports. I've found that when I've tried to ski looking really good, I fall, or I don't do it really well. If I think about getting down the mountain the most efficient way, that maybe makes me look terrible, but I can do it better. I can get down to the mountain without falling.
Right.
But I think that idea that you have to look good all the time is one of those terrible burdens that our ego requires us to have. And by having that conscious mind in that 10,000 foot view, or the psychiatrist counseling the other person, you can start to kill the ego. That usually is the problem.
Exactly. And sometimes when you're so identified with the ego, it's really hard to separate, it's really hard for your ego to allow itself to be separated from your conscious self. And so some of the things that I look for,
that's true.
Am I angry? Ego. Am I blaming someone? Ego. Do I feel wrong? Ego. Is there shame present? Ego. Do I feel less than, not good enough? I mean, the list goes on.
That's right.
Anything in which you don't feel whole and you don't have the capacity in that moment to see the good in the situation or the capacity to be kind to the other person, ego is present.
Boy, Keith, that is a mouthful. That is really well said, and that's a beautiful principle. I think the idea is that anytime we come up with an emotion, we want to have a compassionate inquiry about the source
Yes.
of what that emotion is. And compassionate, I mean feeling, okay, Rick, I know it's important for you to look good, but look at this in terms of what it's cost you and how the expense to your soul has taken a toll for it.
Yeah.
The idea is compassionate inquiry into every emotion, every negative emotion that you have. And by doing that over and over and over, I think you develop a habit, and the habit always seems to get back to my ego has done something that I didn't want, that's caused me suffering, that's doing me no good.
Exactly. Man, so what do you want to end with? Can you end with the thought?
I would like to.
Problem solving?
Well, I think maybe a tap dance. I would
Okay.
prefer. I think they got the message. I'd prefer a tap dance with costumes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we can go eat.
All right, perfect. I love you, man.
I love you.
Thank you.
Adios.